Welcome to APCUG's Wednesday workshops, where we get together in the middle of the week and we learn more about technology. As it is the third Wednesday of the month, that has been the traditional Learning Linux Day, and we're here to start a new year. I'd like to welcome all of you, new people, old people, and we hope that we can provide another series of workshops that you can share or learn more about Linux. Our team, as always, is Orv Beach, who's out in that cold California that's going off the end of the earth. And from the south where it's warm, Judy doesn't want to hear it, but Esneault is down from the Bayou area where it's in the 80s down there. Dave Milton isn't able to be with us for sure today. I don't know if he'll drop in. He has home construction going on, and so he might be able to just drop in, but he's our third person. And I'm going to include that we now have a part-time person, Bill James, who helped us out last year with his travels on Linux. So he's kind of part of the team too, both the Linux team and the team for Zoom. Today we're going to do a number of different things, and I'm going to start today off with a presentation. Being the new year, we thought that we would start with another little changed, updated introduction to Linux. I got to remember which mouse changes that. And I'd like to share some thoughts with you. And this is a presentation for the Wednesday workshop. And of course, it's brought to you by APCUG. And this is one of the benefits of your club's membership as a part of APCUG, that you get to come to all of these workshops that we have on Wednesdays and Saturdays, and videos that we post on our YouTube. All of that is free to you because your club is spending that small little $50 a year to be a member of the group. What is Linux? Always a big question that everybody has. What is Linux? But wait, before I begin, today I need to do a PSA, a public service announcement. What if I told you I had a car? Hardly anyone has noticed this car, but it's out there. It's driving all over the highways of the interstates and the city streets. It's all over the place, but you just haven't noticed it yet. And what if I told you that this car was one of the safest cars you can find? And if you drove in it, you would have hardly any chance of getting hurt at all. It is so safe and secure. And it could come in any color, shape, design, but it's not that flamboyant that everybody else sees it, because you haven't seen it. That car's out there. And what if I told you that this car wraps around your body and fits you perfectly in every way? We've all had the problem. We go to a car and the seats and stuff fit perfect, but every time you get in and out, you'd bump your head on the roof. But this car in every way fits your body perfectly. And what if this car has an unbelievable amount of accessories that you can add to it? Now, I'm not talking about the dice to hang from your rear view mirror. I'm talking about all these accessories and features that would make this car a luxury liner. And if your fit changed, I've changed, you could easily get a different one that again would fit you perfectly. And what if you owned this car outright without any extra fees or charges or anything? It's yours. Do what you want with it. And what if I told you this car was totally free? No cost, ever. So if I had this car for you, would you get it? Even if everyone else around you, they had and drove traditional cars with all of its limitations, would you step forward and go with something new? Just wondering. Okay, let's go back to the topic today. What is Linux? Linux is what we call an open source operating system. And I'll kind of explain open source for those who may be new and haven't come across that word. Linux runs on multi-platform hardware. And that doesn't mean just that it's 32-bit, 64-bit, but there are other platforms that it will run on. A problem we have today with a number of different operating systems is that they're very limited. And Linux still has a wide range of these platforms. Now, Linux is free, as in freedom to do whatever you want with it. And, you know, free lunches. Doesn't cost you anything. Linux is just like Windows, which is Microsoft product, or Mac OS, like Apple. It is an operating system that connects between you and a computer and all the inner workings. Linux will act and work just like your current computer. It's very, very secure and stable. Some Linux are so stable, they are very slow to make any changes because everything is working just fine. We don't want to rock any boats at all. One thing neat about Linux is it's scalable. What I mean by that is it can be installed and run something as small as the Raspberry Pi, which is what we call those single board circuit devices, size of a deck of cards, to, of course, regular laptops, computers, and to the mainframes. So it runs the whole gamut of things you can put it on. Linux is very flexible. You can design your Linux for your needs. Are you just a personal user at home? You can have it run with just that. Are you in a business office situation where you need to have extra software and networking and whatever? It can be done to that, set up for that. And we've got Linux that is powerful enough to run multimedia type programs for those that are in, you know, the music industry and the film industry. One thing that's nice about Linux is it's efficient because you only have to put on Linux what you need. You don't have to put the whole kitchen sink and everything. And so you can build a very small, efficiently running Linux, or you can throw everything in it and have a super power computer. It's very lightweight, doesn't require a lot of resources. You can run Linux probably for a gig, maybe even less on a couple of versions. You don't need a lot of hard drive space. Linux can probably fit, it's the Linux itself on, you know, 25 to 30 gigs of RAM. Just depends on how much stuff you want to add to it. And did I mention it's free? I want to make sure I didn't forget that. Now, Linux is not your one of a kind. And there's only one version of Windows and Mac out there. I differentiate that from editions. Windows went from 3, 95, 97, XP, Vista, all of those. Mac OS has gone through a number of numbers. Those are not different versions, they're different editions. But Linux is like cars, and it has many versions. For example, here are just 4 listed car manufacturers with the umpteen ones that we have out there. And you can see that each manufacturer changes a little bit to make different models of their, or the makes of their cars. I used to be able to use, as an example, in General Motors, there was a time when they had 5 different divisions in General Motors, and they made a car that was the same for all 5 divisions. And each of them were the same car, but had a little bit more luxury to it. But I could have driven a Chevy that had a almost twin Cadillac version. So we have lots of different makes, but they kind of all run the same bit. Now, of course, I do qualify it by saying within the cars, we have gas-driven cars, diesel-driven cars, electric-driven cars. So that's still, it's a car. With Linux, there are many makes as well. Here are some of the big branches or roots of our Linux life: the Slackware, the Debian, Red Hat, SUSE, Gentoo, Arch, Ubuntu, and they do have some of their offsprings that come from that. As an example, Ubuntu came from Debian, Mint originally came from Ubuntu, so there make some changes there. Cars have many models, I call them, where you can see that depending on somebody's needs, we've got compact cars and trucks, and used to have station wagons on my list, but we don't have those anymore. And we're about to get rid of sedans, it sounds. There are some companies that are not making any more sedans. They're all making SUVs. But these are all different models, and you switch according to your needs. When you are a single person, you can do a very small car. When you have a large family, you have to go to something like a minivan or a bigger SUV. And then later on, when you go back to being small, you can go back to smaller cars. Linux has what I call models, and these are desktop environments, all the things that go together to make what you see on your desktop. And here's let's see, 10 different ones that we have. And as we will learn and discuss and talk about this year, they all do the same thing, but they all do it in a little bit different ways. All the way from the ones that are very, very light, hardly have anything on them, but they still run, to the ones that have the kitchen sink on it. And just to show you that Linux has been around, you just haven't seen it, like I said, as a comparison timeline. You know, Windows came out with 3.1 in 90. Linux actually was developed in 91 based off of Unix. A Finnish student in college was trying to come up with a lighter version, a free version of Unix that people could, you know, use. It was a hobby for him, but it sure blossomed. But as you can see on the left-hand side, Windows has gone through editions over the years, whereas Linux has come out with different Linuxes that are started with the same little ingredient, but they're quite different. And we've, you know, go back to the first one, Slackware, and then on through Debian, Gentoo, Root, or Arch. And there are other ones that are out there. Some of them come and go because developers either don't have the time or lose the interest. But these are some of the mainstays that have been out there for a while. And so the question always asks, well, why are there so many Linux? Because I can show you a list that we've talked about before on DistroWatch that only lists the top 100 and then there are more in the wings waiting to get on the top 100. Why are there so many? My answer back is always, why are there so many cars? When we first started cars, Henry Ford made the Model T. They all looked alike. We all had the same one. And finally, some people said, you know, we don't all like the same things. So we started making different cars, different looks and everything, because people have different needs. Well, that's the same thing. In Linux, the developers in Linux feel people aren't all the same. So we have people who develop it for specific reasons. And over the time, we've talked about that. Now, the other reason is this open source that I mentioned at the beginning. And open source that I teach is easily done by comparing it to recipes. If you've gone to a potluck or a dinner where people bring stuff in, and I know most of us have all gone to them because a lot of our computer clubs have holidays and picnics and stuff, and people bring stuff. You can ask somebody about their recipe for that dish because you might want to use it and take it to something. And you usually get two different answers. One is, oh, I can't give you the recipe. That's been kind of a family secret for generations. So I can't tell you what's in it, but I might make it for you. You know, you pay for the ingredients and then I might make it for you, or not going to have it at all. As opposed to this person that you ask and they said, oh, of course, I'll give you the recipe. So-and-so gave me the recipe and we've had the recipe passed around our family and it's been passed around. And so you get the recipe, which gives you the opportunity to know exactly what's in there so that you can make it yourself. And as we mentioned about Linux freedom, you can make changes to it. Because what if you got that recipe or that dish from someone who wouldn't give you the recipe, excuse me, served it to your family and somebody in your family had an allergy to something that was in it and you didn't know it? Could cause a real problem. But if you had the recipe, you can take a look at that and say, uh-oh, I got to take this out. I need to substitute something else for it. Or you could say, that recipe was pretty good, but like my wife does, she said, you know, I wonder if we added this or changed this, how would that be? And so a lot of times you get variations of recipes because people can experiment and try something else out. So that's the same with Linux. Because Linux is open source, that means anybody can have the code to how do you make Linux. And then with freedom, you have the right to change things around. And so that's why we have lots of different Linux, lots of different desktops, because it's open source. Wrong one. So now the question comes, who uses Linux? Oh, all right. Who uses Linux? Okay, now, all of you people that use Linux, raise your hands. Raise them up there high. Oh, there's a few hands, but a lot of hands that aren't up raising. Oh, good, good, good. But there's still a lot of those hands that aren't up in the air. So to those people, have you ever used Google? Have you ever gone and had something to eat at McDonald's? It'd be hard to find somebody who probably hasn't ordered something from Amazon. And I know lots of you are people who use Facebook. Around Christmas time, we got lots of ads on TV. Some of you may have already had Omaha steaks, or somebody sent you a Omaha steak box. In Ohio, we have a company called Burlington with lots of clothing and menswear and stuff. And I know a number of you have probably booked vacations using something like Travelocity. Who hasn't had a pizza from Pizza Hut? Now, I know everybody's getting mail from United States Postal Service, whether it's just bills or Christmas cards recently. How about taking a trip on an airlines flown through the skies? Watched a good movie lately? For those of you with extra money, have you used it to invest in stocks and things? How many of you sitting out there have an Android phone, smartphone? Ever wonder about what it would be like to be up on the International Space Station? All the activities that are going on up there? Anybody have family or served in the Navy, especially on submarines? How about anybody that's dealt with the federal court system through taxes or whatever else? How about that smart TV? We did a workshop last week on about the smart TV. Did you get one for Christmas? Do you plan to maybe get one with your tax returns? How many of you have Wi-Fi in your location? Anybody using the cloud service? Or drive or know somebody that drives a Tesla or a Hyundai or maybe a Mercedes-Benz? Anybody drove those cars? Or how about maybe it's the grandkids, maybe you too, playing with the PlayStation, dealing with other things about NASA. We just had that big flight that went out to circle the moon back, getting ready for us to make trips back. Tell me you haven't used the internet, searched and gone to websites. What about a Microsoft user? Any of you there? Everything that I talked about, every example that I showed you, they run Linux. They run Linux. Think about all of those things that I showed you that you have, have contact with. So I ask again the question, who uses Linux? You all do. So everybody's hands probably have to go up, because I can't imagine that of all those things I showed you that you didn't use one of those. This shirt that's designed by a Linux guy called Tux Digital explains it all. But as you look at this, the penguin is the slogan or the icon for Linux. It's kind of hard to see him because of the black penguin on the black shirt, but Linux is everywhere. The top 500 supercomputers in the world all run Linux. It's a fact. The world runs on Linux. You just didn't know it. It runs Linux everywhere, but just not on your desktop. Most of the desktops run Windows and Macs. So the last question I get is, why haven't I been seeing Linux? If it's out there and everything's running on Linux except for me, why haven't I seen it? And I can tell you that answer real easy. Money. Why? Advertisement. It costs money to advertise the product. Microsoft and Apple cost money. You have to pay them to run their software. You have to buy the hardware, and then you have to pay for the operating system. So that means that Microsoft, Apple, they have money. and they put money into advertising. That's why you see all that stuff. But Linux doesn't cost money. If you're not paying for the Linux operating system, where are they going to get money for advertising? Comes from presentations like this. Why else do you not see it? Money. Manufacturers, when you go out and you buy a computer or laptop, Microsoft has paid them to put Apple or Windows on that computer. So the people, they don't want to necessarily send or sell you a hardware that has nothing on it. And so Microsoft says, here, put Windows on it and we'll give you a little bit of money. Apple went the long way and said, we're making our own. So if you want the Apple operating system, you're going to buy your Apple hardware from us and nobody else. Linux, again, they don't have any money to pay. But I will tell you that there now are a number of hardware companies that are now starting to offer online, usually not in the stores, Linux on their hardware, either laptops, desktops. And I think the reason that they're doing that is that the manufacturer says, hey, if I give a computer and sell it for like the same amount of money I sell a Windows computer, but Windows doesn't get some of that stuff, I get some extra money. So we do now have some Linux out there on hardware like HP, and we have some Linux that are being built by companies specifically for just a Linux operating system. My last reasoning why you don't see it so much, I call it a software waterfall. Software waterfall. What do I mean by that? In the business world, Microsoft cornered the market a number of years ago with a product like Microsoft Office. Judy will tell you that her favorite WordPerfect was out there before, but Office is there. And we won't discuss why Office is in there, but it's through a management and a plan and everything. If you want Microsoft Office, you had to run Microsoft Windows. So the businesses are running Microsoft Office. Well, because the businesses are running it, the university who feeds students into the business world, they've got to be able to train their students to fit in the business world. So they are running Office and Microsoft products. Well, trickle it down. We're sending public school students to the universities, and if the universities are using that, they expect the students who come to university to already know how to use all of that, so they have to learn that in the public schools. And if it's in the public schools, it filters down into the homes. And I know for a fact that when my school was not using Microsoft Office, we were using an open source free product, that out of nowhere, all of a sudden I had a big, huge package that came from Microsoft, flyers to send home to all of my students, and I was the tech coordinator for the building, all of my students with a big sale on Windows Office for home use. How they knew I wasn't using it, I don't know. But that's what I call the software waterfall. And because of all of this, you don't hear about it as much. But through workshops and through presentations, people are finding more and more about Linux and about what it has to offer. So we end up with, why would you want Linux? Oops, wrong. Come on. There we go. You want Linux because it's open source. That means there's nothing hiding from you. The code for Linux and open source software is open to everybody, so nothing can be put in it to sneak around in the background. When you have closed source software, nobody except the developers know what's in there, what's running in the background. And a lot of times that's where viruses and things can come in. When you get some kind of software, when it's closed source, nobody knows what's in there. Linux is open source. If somebody tried to put something into a Linux or an open source piece of software, it would be found right away, because there are people that have nothing better to do than read source code. And they find things like that and they fix it right away. So you want it because it's home source. Of course, you want Linux because it's free. It doesn't cost you anything. You can have and try all these different versions of Linux at no cost. It's customizable to meet your needs. And some of our Linux distros start with, all we are going to put on here is the base operating system, nothing else. You add what you want, so it only has what you need. Uh-oh, that's a commercial. Shouldn't say that. Linux is more secure, reliable, and stable than either of the other ones. You have many models and makes to choose from. Too many, some people say, but that's fine. You can find the one you want. The big thing about Linux, you want it because it works on new and old hardware. There are a lot of computers that are not running Windows 11. They can't. When your support for Windows 10 runs out, you're in problem. Microsoft is encouraging you to buy a new computer. But Linux will bring new life to your older hardware, because it can, we have different versions of Linux that will run on older ones. And so, as another commercial, it just keeps on ticking. Oh, I did mention it was free, didn't I? You want Linux because you have complete control over updates, from all the way from updating the operating system to updating all of the files. You have complete control over what gets done and isn't done. As I mentioned before, little disk space and RAM. I had a computer, still have it. Maximum RAM, 4 gigs. Can't go any higher. Nowadays for Windows, you know, even though it can run on 4, it really doesn't run great. You want Linux because there's an unbelievable amount of free software. There is so much out there for you. And this is where you need to come to workshops and get recommendations on software, because we can have 4 or 5 versions of the same software that does the same job. Because of open sourceness, somebody says, I think it should work this way. I think it should look this way. I think it should add this. So we have options. We can help you. And you want Linux because it's yours. It's not theirs. You don't have to read into the fine print where it says you're just leasing this operating system. It belongs to us and we can make changes whenever we want. Linux is yours. You can do with it what you want. Oh, jump to something else. Do you recognize these? Does that look familiar? How about that? You recognize that? Windows 10, wasn't it? What's the bit? How about this one? Great, Windows 11, huh? Those were actually 2 versions of Linux. They look almost identical. I consider that, I don't know how they get away with it because it looks too much like it. But we have 2 versions of Linux that if you were a Windows 10 person, you could switch. You really almost wouldn't even know it. It would work like you thought it would. It just has the underworkings of a Linux safety and security and all that. That shows you the wide range of Linux that we have. So thank you for allowing me to introduce Linux to you. Hopefully some of the new people have a new insight. Some of the old people, maybe you have some information. This is a workshop or a presentation that's available for anybody to be able to share with their groups. If you need to contact me talking about free, customizable, secure Linux, you can always get a hold of me at freejohn@protonmail.com. Now I'm just going to switch here a second. If we have questions, we can talk about those later. I love virtual desktops because I can just go from one down to the next. Okay, what I'd like to do now is I'd like to talk to you a little bit about the new direction that we might be going with our Learning Linux workshop in 2023. We've been doing this for a couple of years now, and the team is kind of getting to the point where we don't know what to do next. So I've come up with an idea of a template for a meeting that can be changed. Oops, wrong machine. So in our workshops that we're going to have a little portion where we're going to talk about news of the month and questions of the month, more detail. We're going to have us talk about software showcase with things that be of interest. We're going to do a desktop discovery. At times, we're going to do a distro dive. One of our most exciting features for this year is going to be a complete series on taming the terminal. And of course, we'll include the open mic Q&A that we always have, but I think this will become more of a roundtable type Q&A too. So under the news of the month, members of the team will share some timely news that's happening since we've been together. And during the Q&A, all of you attendees can add additional. If you've just read something recently and something's big popping out, we'd love to have more information shared with us. Questions of the month is going to be a good feature. We're going to do this a couple different ways. I'm going to start opening up the email and say that if you would like to have a question dealt with, today we have some, on our workshop, you can send me an email by the first Wednesday of the month, because we meet the third Wednesday, and then that will give our team a couple of weeks to prepare for it. We'll also get those from, and if we have trouble with some of those questions and can't always answer everything during the Q&A, we're encouraging people in the audience, if you can provide some more answers to questions and stuff, please chime in. We want more participation. So you can send those questions to me by the first Wednesday of the month to my JKennedy@apcug.org, or you can put them in the chat box before you leave. Like today, if you want to put something in the chat box and say, I'd like to deal with this question next month, you can do that. Or you can email them to me. But we need to know what it is that you're wanting to talk about. And it's open all the way from beginner stuff to whatever experienced users have. We'll try to find your answers. Under the software showcase, today we'll have a couple of programs that will just kind of showcase that may be not the normal ones that come with a default set of files for programs for a distro, and that we might be interested in. And then, of course, during the Q&A, if you've got something you want to share, only takes a couple minutes, or if you have something that you'd like to share, some neat software, email me by the first Wednesday of the month, and I'll put you in on the list for that time. The desktop discovery, what we're going to do this year is we're going to take a look at a different desktop every month. I'm going to focus with the Ubuntu family only because Ubuntu has 9 different official flavors, each one using a different desktop environment. That way, we'll keep Ubuntu as the constant all through this time and check on these. Now, there's more than 9, so after we get done with the official 9, there's 2 more that are extra ones that haven't been adopted yet by the Ubuntu family, and show you that there's a lot of variety. They all do the same thing, but in a little bit different way, and people have their preferences. So we're going to take a look at that. Now, distro drive is not going to be a regular feature. We have focused mostly on these workshops with the Debian family of Ubuntu and Mint, because Mint is one of the best ones that beginners can use. And I'm not a beginner, but I use Mint, and other people use Mint because it is a well put together distribution. But there are others, as I said in the workshop or the slide with the development, we have other things than Debian, such as the Arch, the OpenSUSE, the Slack, the Gentoo, and there are some others. What I'm hoping is that I'll keep this list visible each month and say, we're still looking for somebody who uses Arch that can take 20 minutes to tell us about Arch and how it's a little bit different and what special features Arch has, or Fedora, or OpenSUSE, even Gentoo, which is kind of a tricky one from what I understand. But yet, interesting thing enough, all of those people that have Chromebooks, the Chrome OS is based off of Gentoo. So all of you people that might be using Chrome, you're using Linux, you just didn't know it. So hopefully, if we get somebody who would like to be able to do that, it's not going to be some of us on the team, because most of us are Debian, Ubuntu, Mint type people, but there are other distros that are excellent distros that just other people use. And now, Taming the Terminal. I'm looking forward to this because I think that a lot of people are afraid of the terminal. They hear horror stories about the terminal. But if you jump into the terminal in the deep end, yeah, it's going to be kind of. But if you start back at the shallow end and wade yourself through it, you're going to find out that there are a lot of things that the terminal can do easily and give you more information. And so our goal is that we are going to start with the very basics and go slow. And over time, we will develop and get more complicated things as we do. And my hope is that, or all of our hope is that even experienced users will find new uses for the terminal, because there's a lot that we can talk about. So we'll start next month with very basic. We are going to also, I'm setting this up to do Taming the Terminal at the end before the Q&A, so that if there are people that totally have no interest in the terminal, you can bail out, watch the video when Judy posts it for the Q&A time. Or if you're a user and you don't, a terminal user, and you don't want to start at the very beginning, you can bail and come back in a little bit later as we do that. But I think this is going to really help show, because I even know that the Windows people, a lot of people in Windows are starting to now use the terminal and the command line for some window things. But I think our approach to start at the beginning will be very helpful. And then, of course, each month as time permits, we'll open up the floor for questions, comments about anything that was presented today, welcome answers if there were things that the team couldn't resolve or additional information. And as always, we hope some great discussions about Linux from the beginner level to more experienced level. And then this is where you can also be able to throw in a question for next month, and we'll deal with that. But I want to make it very clear that this new format is just a format and not the only what we'll be using. As we get submitted ideas that are going to take a longer period of time to work on, we'll put off this default format and we'll do a full topic or 2 topics at a workshop. It's just when we don't have a lot of submissions for what to do, we'll have a fallback to have something ready each month. So now we'll kind of get on to today's agenda with the team and do some of the stuff that's I've been talking about. We're not going to do the full stuff today, but we're going to do some. And as an example, I'm back. We've got some news of the month, and Cal said he had something that was newsworthy to share with everybody. So Cal, if you wanted to.
Uh-oh, wrong one.
We'll come back to that one in the next section.
Hold on.
Okay.
Okay, everybody always asks what's the best distro. And for the past 6 or 7 years, there's a news source for free and open source software that holds gets everybody's opinion and holds a poll. So here's the question they ask. They ask, out of these 10 distros, which was the best for 2022? And as of today, here are the results. I think it ends today. And you can see the list, Fedora and Pop! OS, and it goes on down. And last year, I shared another place where this is ranked is in DistroWatch. And so I compared the two. This is DistroWatch as of this morning, and looked at the differences. And basically, Fedora and Pop! OS are used by the FOSS people, who are usually a lot of developers, because they're a little more powerful. They have a little less tools. And most people who want a lot of tools and everything made up for them, MX Linux, Endeavor, Linux Mint, Manjaro, those distros are pretty well. And pretty much the big guys, Ubuntu and Debian, and they all fall about in the same place. The one anomaly I did see, which I think is Elementary OS, which I think they spiked the poll, because they're really almost dead. They've been having a lot of problems. And I think they got a lot of voters. One reason for Elementary OS is they're trying to have people pay for software, and I'm sure the developers like that, so they got a lot of votes for that. But anyway, here, if the people ask what is the best distro, here are 2 sources. Take them for what you want.
Excellent idea. And Of course, a few of those are distros that we could dive into if somebody who had experience with it could do it. I saw a piece of information that was really interesting, is that they're going to start developing an open source voice assist program. They're going to go after Siri and Miss A and all those, and with an open source one. And the interesting thing about it is that it's going to be designed to run internally with all of the assistance on home automation stuff. So, you know, that's something that Bill might go, ooh, something I'm going to check into, because right now all of the assist devices that we have to go out on the internet to be able to get stuff. So it'll be interesting to see what they come up with on that. Along with what Cal just said with the Fedora being one of the top listed ones, I just saw that Fedora is going to add the Budgie desktop environment as one of their options. The Budgie one we'll look at later is very modernistic, and a lot of people like it. But that's interesting. It's the first new desktop that Fedora, they've been pretty much strictly a GNOME desktop, but they are now branching out because people who like Fedora don't necessarily like the GNOME desktop. The last piece of information that I found that I thought was very newsworthy, and it's something to be watched. The Linux Foundation has started a new project, and that's one of the big governing bodies of Linux, the Linux Foundation. They are going after Google Maps.
Oh.
And trying to come up with an open source map program. And they have a number of interesting people who are joining this project. Among the people that are going to be joining the foundation to try to work on this to maybe bring down the king of maps is Meta, which is a storage device, Microsoft, who does have a map program, but they're joining this, the AWS, which is the Amazon something system, Amazon W system. And an interesting thing is TomTom. I don't know how many of you had a TomTom GPS device from a long time ago. They're over in Europe, but they are joining in with this group of developers to work together on seeing if they can topple the king. So very interesting. So during Q&A, if anybody else has read something recently and said, hey, here's a big news thing. There's always news about Linux, because there's always a new edition of a software, a new edition of a distro. But once in a while, we find some interesting things like that, and what Cal did, because that's interesting. Because I would probably trust the FOSS rankings a little bit more than DistroWatch, because DistroWatch, you don't have to be using it. You can just keep going there and looking at that website to check on it, and that counts. Whereas to get out and say what you are using, on my email, it says, I am a Linux Mint user. Nobody records that, but that's it. Okay, I want to move now to our section on questions of the month. And I'm just going to jump, because I got a chat that I wanted to say this is how it's going to work, because somebody asked about defining terminal. And that's probably going to be the first thing on the workshop next month for our Taming the Terminal is, what is a terminal? What's it for? Okay, my screen's going funny. So that's great, because that would be answered on that one next time. We might be able to talk about this there. So from last year, I could say that from last year, we had some leftover questions that we're going to address today. And again, if you have some questions that you would like addressed, either email them to me by the first Wednesday of the month so we can include it in, or you can throw it in the chat box and say, here's a question or a topic for next month. The first one that Orv is going to deal with is, we had somebody wanting to know about web cameras software, where you can have a program that can either take your picture or take a video using your webcam. Orv, do you want to take over and talk a little bit about what you've been working on for this?
Yeah, I'll be happy to. The question was specifically about a problem with a program called Cheese, which is used to either capture a screenshot from your webcam or a short bit of video. I looked into that, and that would have been about a 5-minute presentation. So I expanded it. Can I show that, John? Is that okay? Okay, thank you. Good thing I can read lips. Okay. Okay, so anyway. So we're going to talk very briefly about video and screen capture under Linux, because talking about Cheese wouldn't take very long. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about programs that are out there for capturing webcams. Cheese, VLC, which I'm sure everybody knows, which originally stood for Video LAN Client, but which is now just VLC. And this thing with the unpronounceable name, which is the GTK plus UVC viewer, and UVC is the driver for capturing USB video cams. And I'll talk about Simple Screen Recorder because it's really useful. Then we'll talk about capturing windows or screens, because webcams you can only do so much with. Simple Screen Recorder can also do that. And there's another one called Record My Desktop, which is the whole mishigas. And for bonus material, I'm going to talk very briefly about Open Broadcaster Studio, which is quite impressive. So anyway, I remember Cheese fondly when my grandkids were young. They used to like to play with this because it has visual effects. You can distort the screenshots in all sorts of different ways, and they thought that was hilarious, and they had a lot of fun with it. Well, that was a long time ago. They're in their 20s now, so that's how long this has been around. So I got it out, and much to my surprise, it's no longer usable. A lot of reports out there about people struggling. I couldn't make it record video. It locked up even when you went in to make configuration changes. A lot of complaints about it out there. So I suspect they have not kept up with the maintenance of Cheese, and it's got some of what they call bit rot. Somebody updates a library and the application that uses it doesn't update itself accordingly, and so it's no longer stable or no longer runs. So maybe they'll fix it, but for now, I don't think it's usable. VLC can be used to capture video. The first thing you have to do is tell it to use your camera. And if you click on the media button and tab up in the upper left, it'll bring up this window here. Then you have to tell it the capture mode, which is video camera. And it seems to think I have 2 video devices, and maybe I do, but in any case, the webcam is video 0. And you set those up. The next thing you have to do, if you'll notice down the lower left, the leftmost icon is a grayed out circular button. That's the record button. You'll notice it's grayed out. You have to go into the view section and click on advanced controls, because apparently they don't want you accidentally recording. Once you do that, you'll notice that the button is now red, which means you can click it. You can ignore the ugly guy in the window. So that's how you record for VLC. You have to tell it where you're going to record to. I would recommend just pointing it to the videos directory under your home directory. 99% of the distributions set up that directory automatically when you create a user. GUVC view, oh, that's unpronounceable. Anyway, when you start it, this is what you see, just a capture window. But next to it, you'll see this, which is the control window. And it's got all sorts of buttons and windows, or buttons and controls. There's one for image controls. H.264 is the video protocol. H.264 and H.265 are two of the most modern and popular ones. H.264 is fine for what we're doing here. H.265 is mostly concerned with controlling bandwidth when you're streaming it, and that's not what this is for. Video controls, audio controls, you can record audio or not if you want. Up here, you can capture an image. If you click on capture video, it will start recording video to the location you've specified in the settings. And when you want to stop recording, you click on quit. By the way, the reason I'm not demoing these on Zoom, Zoom has a lot of problems with live video devices. Some of these worked and some worked very erratically. So we'll just do static demonstrations here.
Yeah, we found that they don't play well together.
No, they don't. This is what you get when you start up Simple Screen Recorder. This is the input profile. Well, that's the top. I don't use it. That's for when you're going to use Simple Screen Recorder for 2 or 3 different processes. You can specify a profile and pull it up, and it will configure Simple Screen Recorder for your purpose. Under video input, you can see you got record the entire screen, record a fixed rectangle, follow the cursor, which I've never used, record OpenGL. OpenGL is a video driver. That's for really oddball things. I imagine it would pull up a window that you could tell it which oddball thing to record. And down at the bottom is a V4L2 device. Back when Linux didn't have video capabilities, the first driver for it was called Video for Linux, V4L. The second generation of it was V4L2, and it's stayed there ever since. So V4L2 is just referring to a video device, and it found my /dev/video 0. All IO devices are under /dev, which is a directory. Under Linux, input-out devices look like a file in dev. And that's a topic for 3 or 4 different sessions, but we won't go there. What I've used it for in the past was the second one down, record a fixed rectangle. We have a shelf underneath the back patio, and from time to time, the house finches make a nest there, and we have a nest cam. But the shelf is rather long, and inevitably they'll put the nest cam or the nest as far away from the camera as they can. So I can record it, but the nest only takes up a small portion of the webcam window. So I told it to record a fixed rectangle, and that fixed rectangle was around the nest. So I basically was doing a real-time video zoom, digital video zoom there, and recording when the mom and pop were feeding the chicks. It was a lot of fun. So that's what I used it for. So anyway, you get this all configured, and you click on continue down at the bottom. And you get this screen. It says, well, where do you want to put it? The container is the file format. Part of the container is the video, part of the container is the audio. and there's other bits and pieces in there, which is probably a whole semester of discussion about video formats. But in any case, Matroska is the default, and almost any video player can play it back. You can play with that. Notice it's got H.264 again, that's fine. You can do a slower or faster bit rate, which means how high a resolution, how frequently the video is sampled. In this case, 128,000 times per second. His default's fine. Vorbis is the audio codec. There's other ones in here. Vorbis is an open source audio codec, an audio recording format, and everything understands it. You can leave it like it is. You click the continue button again, and you've got a start recording button up the top to start recording, obviously, and you click it to stop. You can do a preview. You can enable recording hotkey. I've never used that. I've just used the start and stop. And down at the bottom, you save recording, and it will save to presumably your videos directory. So simple screen recorder can be used to capture pretty much anything on the screen. Record My Desktop does exactly what it says. It records your entire desktop. The top button there, that's the about, is helpful if you're going to run it. It's command line only at this time. That little asterisk reminds me to tell you that while there is a GTK UI front end for it, GTK is what GNOME uses. There's also a Qt desktop, and Qt is what KDE Plasma would use to build a front end, but they're not available in your distribution. And to be honest, I went out and looked at them and couldn't figure out how to install them. So we'll call it command line only at this time. And basically, to start recording, you type record my desktop in a terminal. And when you're done, you just stop it with Control-C and it will write it out. Because I have two high resolution screens on as part of my desktop, it can take quite a while to record it out. And then you could edit it as you want. I thought I'd mention that. So OBS is a Open Broadcaster Studio. I'm not going to demo it, but here's a screenshot. This is I'm not going to say very high end, but very, very featureful application you can use to create presentations. You merge your camera in there. That's just a background. I could run a presentation there, or run a program and record it or stream it, or whatever you want to do. It's in the distro repositories. You can just type, well, install OBS, or if you're me, you would do sudo app-y install OBS and be done with it, but that's just me. I've used it just a couple times. Takes a little bit to set up, but once you're done, you can do some very professional presentations, or let's call them products, with this. I wish I had more. I wish I had more reason to use it. It's fun. And that concludes my presentation. If anybody has any questions, let me stop sharing. I think I stopped sharing. Did I stop sharing?
Yep.
Okay. Good.
That was good. I even learned something because when that question came up before, to me, I thought it was a simple, I don't understand why you're having trouble with this, because in the old days when I'd use Cheese, there was always two buttons. It said single shot, something like whatever word they use, and video. But obviously in the newer versions, like you showed me, so I know now to watch for that, you had to check the advanced before you could get that control. So for the person, and I can't remember now who sent me that, hopefully they're online to know that if you want to do a video on Cheese, probably the only thing that's holding you back was clicking that advanced button to give you the feature of making a recording.
Oh, hey, John, that was under VLC.
Oh, that was under VLC. Okay.
Yeah.
All
Yeah.
right, so we still have to check on the cheese, because the cheese should just have it. But the bottom line is, I think with cheese that Orv and I worked out is, it's a program that's been around. It works, but maybe it just doesn't work when you're trying to do it with Zoom or something else. It's the same thing. We have problems if on our workshops with a Zoom workshop trying to do a demonstration with AnyDesk or TeamViewer. They always don't work because you're trying to use a shared screen over a shared screen. It doesn't kind of always work that way.
That's right. Yeah.
So great. So I'm ready to even try the recording programs, because I always think that our groups need simple recordings to show people how to do something. And rather than have you do it to 10 different people, make the recording once and then send them the file and say, here, watch how to do this. Watch how to open an attachment and then such. Excuse me. All right, moving on to our second question that Cal's going to kind of lead the discussion and give some points of view. We've had, again, and just today, we had somebody submit the question about dual booting and partitioning. So the team members, and I speak for Dave as well, we have our very biased opinions about this topic, but I'm going to let Cal take over and share that presentation he was going to try to share earlier and talk about the dual booting and partitioning issue that we have with Linux and Windows. And there is the exact question that we were sent. Gotta unmute for me. Cal, you're muted.
All right, let's try this again.
Okay, I hear you now.
Okay, the question as I understood it, I wrote here is, why did the same partitioning plan I used for dual booting Windows on an earlier Mint no longer work for Mint 21? Now this is kind of tough when you're not physically at a machine to handle hardware. So I thought I'd cover a couple possible simple scenarios. Number one, when he went from Mint to Mint 21, he was probably on Mint 20. And this was a major change. Everything changed at the bottom. The kernel changed, the base Ubuntu changed. There was a lot of things going on. And in order to do this, it is more than likely that his disk partitions were altered to such a point that his boot pointers are no longer correct. That is, the boot loaders which point to starting the Mint or other operating system. And two things you could try, quick things. Number one is go get the live distro for Mint 21, plug it in as a live distro, and it has a boot repair tool on it. And I'll go over that in a minute or two. The second thing is, if you can still access Windows, just take Windows back to the way it originally was. Using the Windows tools, remove the Mint partition, remove the entry in the EFI boot, expand the partition what Windows has to the maximum, then to get the Min21 USB, start the install and have it automatically install and remap as a side-by-side, and it will remap grub. So this is a couple of ways that probably won't work, but they're the two logical choices. People who know how to deal with Linux can do much more. The problem with dual booting is that you're fooling with the boot, and if you do it wrong, then the computer won't boot at all. So here's my opinion. Dual booting, I used to dual boot a lot, and it has become more difficult with time. And the reasons is we've had MBR, then we had GPT and EFI structures. Then Windows came out with Secure Boot, and then they came out with their Trusted Platform module. And so in general, I shy away from dual booting. I don't suggest it. There are other options if you want to try Linux. One is, of course, just try a live USB and get used to it. A lot of people use virtual machines. You can have the virtual machine inside of Linux or inside of Windows. We spent 3 sessions last year talking about getting an old extra PC now that Windows 10 is going out and Windows 11 is appearing and people get new hardware. Another thing you can do is to use a second drive. I did that for years. I just had 2 drives in the bays. You can add them extra SSDs if you know how to configure them. So if you want to have 2 systems, these are the ways I recommend. I've just had lots and lots of problems with dual booting. Here is the Mint repair tool. You stick in the USB, you go to the repair tool, and probably just click on this recommended repair. What it's actually going to do, it's actually going to do these things. It's going to back up the boot tables. It's going to reinstall grub. It's going to make an EFI file, a boot file for Windows. It's going to restore EFI backups. It's going to give you 10 seconds or more in a grub menu. And if it's successful, it'll tell you what it did. Sometimes this works. If you did a simple side-by-side install, this has a good chance of working. If you did it yourself in a manual install, the something else choice, this probably won't work. In any case, every now and then, if you have a dual boot, go ahead and update your grub, and it'll keep all the pointers in the right place. One of the problems I found with the EFI boots versus the old MBR boots is that every time you keep adding things, it does not remove the bootloader listing out of the boot manager. There's a program you can get called EFI Boot Manager, and you can kind of clean it up with this terminal command. Again, it's a terminal command. So my bottom line is, if you're fooling around with dual boots, you need to know what you're doing or have somebody help you, because it's a very dangerous thing. And we recommend other ways to do it: virtual machines, second device, etc.
Cal, where were you when I needed you? Yep. He said grub. Grand
Universal bootloader.
Universal, yeah. Grand Universal Bootloader, grub. And there's a grub too, because we always have the new version. Cal, I could have really used you a few weeks ago. As you talked, I think it was, about bringing new life to an old laptop. I have not my oldest laptop, but this laptop that I use regularly, was starting to run slow, but it was the old IDE SATA drive. And so our thing was to get a new SSD. So I bought a new SSD and threw it in, and I could not get Linux installed. I wasn't dual booting. I was just trying to install my Mint back in on a new hard drive. What I noticed in the boot menu was that there were two other boot things in it. And I'm going, this is a brand new hard drive. How could there be, but it was stuck in the BIOS. So I finally somehow got rid of those, but I could install the Linux. And here's where we're talking about this new things. I installed it correctly. I did it with my own way of partitioning, and when it boot up, but somehow in the boot thing, if I somehow hit another option, it would run. It just wouldn't run to begin with. Bottom line is, what it seems to be is that I've never had to do this before. I could always just install. You've got to have that UEFI boot partition, I think, nowadays, because of modern hardware. Because once I put that 1 gig of a UEFI boot, and that's in an option of your install, it worked fine. I've never had to do that before. I've gotten, we set up our Linux laptops with Mint for our club, and I would get the error message that says you don't have the UEFI or the EFI boot. It might not root right. I would just ignore it, and everything went fine. But not this time. So
that's good. That's because you had a legacy boot checked in your BIOS.
Yeah. So,
and if you don't have it and you're going to straight AFI, then you run into all these, I don't want to call them issues, they're procedures that you need to know how to do.
Yeah. So, you know, Dave Melton, who's part of our group, who, Judy, I am no longer going to call a newbie like you do, because when he wrote to me and told me about what some of the things he's doing stuff that I don't do. So we're not going to call him the newbie anymore, like we said. But anyway, he wanted to make the point too about recommending people stay away from trying to deal with this dual booting, because when Windows updates, sometimes that does something. When Linux could update, save yourself a problem. Cal made a good point, and I got one over here. I have a separate hard drive that's a Linux hard drive, and if I put it in an enclosure, which I haven't done yet because I rescued this from our club, I can boot up this Windows computer to Linux just by going through the BIOS and say boot to that drive, and then I'm not causing any kind of a trouble between the two. That's, you know, Dave's suggestion. An external drive with Linux on it, boot to it, because you'd want the bigger one, so you have more storage stuff. The other thing that Cal said is one of the things that we did at our computer club, because we were teaching both Windows classes and we had a very strong Linux SIG, and we tried to do the dual booting, and that caused the Windows people some problems. They didn't like that. But we ended up putting in 2 hard drives. One was a Windows hard drive, one was a Linux. And when we start up the computer, we hit the F12 or whatever on our computers, and it says, what do you want to boot, Windows or Linux? Chose Linux, everything worked fine. Updates to Linux, no problem. Update to Windows, no problem. And we made one change to that because the Linux or the Windows people didn't like it that Linux could access the Windows computer because it's the hard drive on there. So they devised a power switch. They built one, and so they put it on the 2 different hard drives, and so you'd have to flip a switch saying today we're using Windows, and Linux wouldn't even boot up, and or we're using Linux. So we put up with that, knowing in the back of our mind that anytime we wanted to get into the Windows, all we had to do was put a live CD in, and we would get there. So I think that's the best bet. Nowadays, there are lots of ways you can get inexpensive used computers. The dual booting your hard drive with not the traditional dual booting, but 2 drives that you switch with your BIOS. That's the way to try it out. You can try it out virtually, but again, it doesn't run quite the same if it's not on a traditional hard drive. So we have some videos on doing our dual booting in the past. And as Cal says, I would now recommend that if you really need to do dual booting, do it side by side. Don't go with the I want to have a root, I want to have a home, I want to have something else. Do it the simplest way, and you know, take it that way for ease of access.
Ooh.
Yes, Judy.
I have a comment. There is an article in Linux format, October 20, issue 294, about multi-booting Linux 21.
Mint 21. Okay. Yeah. I used to be a dual booter, but definitely along with the lines with Cal and Al and Dave, it gets to be too much of a headache now.
The problem, you can follow those instructions and do it. And then if you have an update, a major update, it doesn't transfer. And so sooner or later you run into the problem again, even though you can do it initially. So anyway.
It's interesting how things change, because shortly after Dave retired a couple of years ago, he did a dual boot, and he had Windows 10 at the time. I think it was elementary, and Windows 7. And had no problem at all switching between them, and another version of Windows 10. So he had 4 things. And it was just absolute fascinating to see him do that. And so what you're saying is, if I asked him to do something like that again, he'd say, buzz off, Judy.
Yeah, he would.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'll just throw in that in our teaching class at our computer club, when we were making the transition from 7 to 10, skip over 8, you know, we had people coming to class that were still on 7, people who were 10. So we were dual booting with just Windows 7 and 10. And that boot didn't even play well together, because the way that Windows 10 had their structure with their quick shutdown and whatever caused problems for Windows 7. So dual booting is not really as it should have been. There's ways around it to take care of that. Moving on to another question that came up. And hide. There we go. The question came up about Windows programs on Linux. And this has come up a number of times. And it's kind of a, what is it that you need, I guess is the answer. For a lot of the times, we sometimes say Linux has programs that will meet your needs. But once in a while, we get told that there are programs that will not run, or equivalents on Linux, and we need to run those. And sometimes you're at a loss. But reluctantly, some of us talk about the ways that you can do that. And since that's the question, we're going to bring that up and, oop, wrong mouse. There's a program called Wine. And it stood for Wine is not an emulator. And back in the days before I was starting into computer, I guess that we were using emulators because we were using those things like dumb terminals and pretending they were being something that they weren't. But Wine is not. Wine's supposed to be a compatibility layer, as it says here. And it becomes the communication between Linux and your Windows program. So Windows sends things to the operating system thinking it's Windows, and then the Wine program changes those into instructions that Linux knows, and then it works. And one program that people use for running programs designed for Windows on Linux is called Wine. Some distros come with it default. Some distros don't, but all you need to do probably is go to your software sources. Check that out. As you can see on here, I can go, whoops, wrong mouse again. I can go down to download and I can get whatever package I need, you know, Ubuntu, Debian, or whatever. But sometimes it's always best to check your software store first, because that way you're using the program that your distro is managing and has tested out, you know, belongs there. So with the Wine, they have a database of programs that work with Wine. And this is an example of their, what they call their Platinum one. And so all of these programs would work on Wine on your computer. Most of it is usually games because people are always wanting to do games. And then there's a gold list, which is the next level, said that this one, they say some special configuration needed. And then you can go down to their silver, and there are some minor issues, but don't really affect the way the program works. And then there's another list, the bronze list, that they aren't listing, you know, here. But there are lots of programs that are out there that will be in their database. They say currently there's 28,000 in the database that could work with Windows. So the problem is you've got to have a program that works. Sometimes you have to have the licensing for it so that you can be able to run the program, because it'll say what's the code you have to put in. Sometimes with these kind of like with Wine and some of the others, they can bypass, and you can run the program without. Not that we are saying you should, but that way you can. Now, Wine's not necessarily the best one out there. So we have a company that has made a new one that's called Play on Linux. And this kind of goes with Wine to download something that makes it all easier to run it. And a lot of people use Play on Linux, and you do the same thing with the Play on Linux. Wrong mouse again. You know, you get different programs. You go to their list, and it's like it runs in a container, it says. So that you can go to their list and find programs and run it. Now, for example, here's their supported software. Let's just go to the Office one. So if you were wanting to run any of these programs, these are all supported by Play on Linux. So those people that needed Acrobat Editor or AdWords, anything on that list. Oh, there we go. For somebody who likes the Microsoft Money, these will all run under Play on Linux through Wine on your Linux machine. And like I said, all these different categories. Multimedia, I'm anxious. Oops. Okay, I was going to look for W. Okay, Windows Media Player's on there. I was looking for Judy's Windows Video editor program. But that's what you can do. You know, I don't know all of the programs, but there are quite a lot of them here that can run. And you can always try adding a program and see if the program you have will run under the Play on Linux. Now, the other one that's added here, and I don't know why that box is there. It's not on my screen. Let me see if I do this. Nope, that's worse. The newest one out there, and I always like it. A lot of times, you know, with Linux and different versions, we have play on kind of words. One of our file manager that is an old one is called Nautilus, and that's the one that the GNOME desktop usually uses. Well, the Malte one has a different version of it, and they call it Nemo. And most of us are old enough that we know the story about 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. But if not, Nautilus was the name of the ship, and Nemo was the captain of the ship. So they kind of played with that word that, okay, we're taking the Nautilus's file manager and making a variation called Nemo. They do that quite a lot. Here's another example. The original was Wine for the program that can let you run Windows programs on Linux. But after we did the one with the Play on Linux, somebody worked another development to one, maybe it runs a little bit better in a container, and it's called Bottles. And so Bottles is the new one that I think if you're going to be somebody who's going to want to try running Windows programs on Linux, you need to try this. And you can check first to see if it's in your software management repository, or you can come here and download. And it's pretty much the same thing, only what they do is they run these in containers. And Cal did a great job in the past explaining about containers, and that's how that the modern way is that everything that you need for a program is together in a container. No more, I use this file that's already here, or I use that file, which we call dependencies. Everything comes together. So you can get to install the whole program, and it works better. And again, they have a big database, and they take care of the dependencies and the components. And oh, I thought this one, let me see if it's under apps. I think it's under the program itself. Oh yeah, so a lot of people do it for the gaming, and you can see that all of these companies that deal with gaming, which the big ones are Epic Games, Steam, and EA Launcher. So just about any kind of game that you want. So you install the program, go through the program where you can pick the kind of environment you want, pick the game you want or program you want, and you can get things to run on Linux from Windows. So, you know, my answer is, if it's going to take using Wine or Bottles to run your Windows program on Linux to get you to use Linux, well, okay. And then hopefully you'll find out later that you really don't need those programs anymore. Now, there is one last, and it disappeared on me. I had it all here set, ready to go. So we'll find it again. And this is a program that I reluctantly share because of who I am. And this is a program called Crossover. And it's just like that, crossing over from Windows to Linux. It's created by a company called Codeweavers. And this is the granddaddy of those programs. Through this crossover, you'll probably be able to run any Windows program that you wanted on Linux. It has a free version for 2 weeks so that you could test out what you're trying to see if it'll run. And the reason I do that, it works, there's the one for Mint and Fedora and all, is that this is not a free program. And so Free John reluctantly tells you about it. But again, if you're willing to pay the money and move to Linux so you can run this program, okay. I had it written down as the price. And when I went and checked it last night, that must be old price. This program Crossover costs $74 a year. Now they do give you, I guess, a discount if you do an automatic renewal, so you probably get some percentage off of that. We're going to do Crossover, and it's good. What they've said, and it works for Mac, so you can cross over that way. But if we go to the Linux one, you'll see that it's $74, and that's just for 1 year. And you can buy a lifetime subscription on that. Crossover Linux is the program that will work. All sorts of tutorials, and Crossover even works on Chrome. So if you want to be able to run some of those programs on Chrome. So I saved the Cadillac for last. So my answer would be, I would start with Wine, move to Play on Linux, and then go to Bottles. And then if you still aren't having success and you really need to, you need to go to Crossover for playing those games. Now, Bill, when I was talking with him, said, don't forget that there is another alternative to trying to run programs on top. And Bill, do you want to share about what you were saying about Office and those?
Sure.
Oh, you muted again.
When we were at our last Linux workshop, was just using running Office programs through a web browser, and you can have your use your choice. You can use the default one that comes with Linux, which is Firefox, or install a Chrome, or I even install Edge if you like. But you can run a lot of Windows programs through a web browser. Now the short of that is the fact that you are having to store things to the cloud if you're going to save anything. So that would be one of the drawbacks of doing that, but that is an alternative. And that's what I'm doing as I like the capability of being able to share files and folders between devices. For example, last night we talked about a PowerPoint program that wanted, and at the time I was in bed, and I just had my iPad handy, so I just grabbed it and found the file and sent it to her from my iPad. I didn't have to get up and go to my desktop or find my laptop or whatever. So I'm just kind of a lazy guy, I guess.
Well, and we're finding out that the world is going to cloud-based. So you're going to probably find more and more programs that are going to be web-based in the cloud. So platform that you're running on is not going to be an issue. Choose the one that's the safest and whatever for that.
I have a comment.
Yeah.
Tim from Chicago Computer Society says, the best solution for running on Linux is a virtual machine. Install Windows and get a cheap license key and run those programs in a true Windows environment. You might be able to do the same with Mac OS.
A very good one. But, you know, for some people that means you've got to create a virtual machine. You got to run the virtual machine. When you use a virtual machine, you've got to share your memory between the two. And, you know, depending on how much memory some of these programs want, and then you have to share with your regular desktop, you know, issues. But I still think, and Cal said it before, the best solution is I have a Windows machine that runs that window program that I have to have, and I run a Linux machine to do everything else. So on that. Okay, one last quick question with an easy answer. Somebody asked about a program that they heard called Time Shift. And just to quickly mention that Time Shift is a program that started out in Mint, but is available on different distros that would be equal to the old restore point that Microsoft had that I could never get to work right. Because every time I would go restore point said none created. So Time Shift is what that does. I run it on this laptop that I have right here. And what it does on a daily basis and a weekly basis and a monthly basis takes a picture of the operating system. It doesn't deal with my software. I do a different way with that. And in case an update or something messes up, then all I do is get into the Time Shift program, say, go back in time and shift things to when it was working right. And it did that. And Bill also mentioned that when we're talking about this, that Time Machine is the name of the program that's in the Mac machine. And Windows now has, you know, they have their own version of the program that's supposed to, you know, take you back. So Time Machine, Time Shift, something that everybody should be running so that if something happens when you do an update and you blow it out, then you can just go back in time and pick yourself up without having to start over again. Now that's different than what we'll talk about later in March when we talk about backups.
Yes.
Backup to your image or back up your files, but Time Shift is like restore points.
So what do you use to back up?
They got to come in March and find out.
Aha! Just
Well,
gotcha.
I do Time Shift for my operating system, and then I use my backup cloud program. And then Linux also has a way that I can go into a menu, click a button, and it will save the listings of all the programs I have installed so I can quickly install them back in if I needed to.
Outstanding, and
Yeah.
thank you so much. If anybody else has a backup program that they really like, it's World Backup Day on March 31st, and our last Wednesday workshop will be all about backing up. I have a question for you.
Okay.
We get this question quite often. What's a good option for Quicken in Linux? Does anybody use GNU cache? Anybody? Nobody?
Yeah.
Because I Googled it and it said that's the #1 program that
It is. Yeah.
Nobody uses. I was looking for a demo.
Well, I still use my paper and pencil checkbook. So all the, you know, stuff's on the bank line. But yeah, the GNU cache is, and that's another one of the things that Quicken doesn't feel the need to make a version that runs on Linux. So get that old laptop that'll run your Windows and use that for your Quicken stuff, and then use your Linux for everything else. One other thing on our list today from our template that we have. Software showcase. Cal had one and I had one that we'll just throw out. And again, if you have some software that you want to showcase, send me an email that says, hey, I'd like to show something off at the next meeting, and we can put you on the list. So Cal, tell me about your software to showcase.
All right, let me unmute here. Okay, a PDF arranger. This is a tool for managing PDF documents. PDF format is ubiquitous. It's used to transmit a lot of documents. PDF readers are everywhere in every operating system that I've ever seen. So you don't need a special program, like you don't have to have PowerPoint or something to read a PDF file. And PDF files are generally organized into pages. And you may only want to save a portion of the file that is just 1 or 2 pages, or you may want to combine 2 PDF files into 1 PDF. And the simple approach, and this is video editors can do this too sometimes, is simply to merge the documents and delete the pages you don't want. Just keep the good stuff. And PDF Arranger is the tool that I found useful to do this. It can be found in any distribution. You can even find it online. Go to PDF Arranger online. And I think I can do a quick demo. It has a very simple system. There's just add a file. So I'll go find a file, and if I can get to it. Here is so I'm going to add this file to PDF Arranger. And this is one of John's old files. And then I could add another one, which is one of Kurt's old files. And our presentations we save as PDFs. And here you can see John's at the top and now Kurt's at the bottom. And if I just wanted to save, just say delete and just save that particular slide from John. And maybe maybe I want to save page 7 from Kurt. And then the rest of them I want to get rid of. So now I have a PDF file, which maybe these are the only 2 slides that I thought had the information I needed for a particular reason. And then I can save that as a separate PDF file. And so it's a good way to kind of, if I'm a great believer in simplifying things. So this is a great way to get rid of all the extra stuff that you really don't want to save.
And as a Windows user, can I also use that?
As what?
As a Windows user, can I also?
Yeah, you can use it on Windows.
That is the coolest thing. Thank you so much for showing that. I have some questions, John.
Okay, 1 second here. We're going to show one other piece of software. I've mentioned in some of my presentations, and some other people probably have as well, about a program that's called 7-Zip. In the Windows days, we used to use WinZip, and I think that's the program, was a paid program, but it said as long as you were testing it, it was free. And so I've known people who were testing it for 5-6 years that they just say, I'm still testing, I'm still testing. Of course, since then, we've got a lot of other programs that have come out free. But another program that I'm going to throw out for you to investigate is called PZip. And it does the same thing, but they just come out with a new version that really looks nice. And again, you saw me, I use the search, rather than go to categories, just say, computer, find it. And you can see in this window, it's very similar to what WinZip would have, or 7-Zip. I can do this program to add files to what I want to zip, or the opposite. If I got a zipped file from someone, I can extract it. So this one, it's a very, to me, it's a very nice, easy looking one. It's not cluttered. And so you would just say, that you want to add files, and then just drag the files here, or right click for that. And then of course, down at the bottom, where do you want it to go? And right now it's set by default that it's going to go to a zip file. You can set a password for it, so that the file is encrypted, and the person to open it has to have the password to open it. And like we were with other things, there's always types. Zip is the most common, but if you have some specific one that you need to do, tar is a Linux kind of file, and it looks like that there's a default P file, and there's the 7-Zip. So you can decide which you want to do, and some more, options about the saving, how fast you zip it and whatever. So this is a program. Oh, it even has advanced for those who really know what they're doing. It's just like with me in LibreOffice. When I create a PDF file, I've just started going to the option to do it directly, because I get to that menu of all the things you can do with creating a PDF. I'm going, what all does this do? Just do it. So PZip, capital PEA, capital ZIP, is a free and open source software. To jump on Judy's question, I believe it can be run, since it's an open source. I think it's across platform too, but she can check it out. So PZip, I think that I don't have 7-Zip on this new new installed, so I think I'll stick with the PZip for a while. So again, if you have a piece of software that you would like to showcase and tell us about, only needs to be just a few minutes. Let me know. We'll add you to our section for software showcase, and hopefully we all learn some other optionals, because like I said, hundreds out there for software. Judy.
I love the software showcase. That is way cool. Can I replace old out of support Chrome OS with Linux Mint on a Chromebook?
Yeah. Tim has that. Tim, have you done that already?
Yes, I've done it with about 7 different little old Chromebooks. I have an ASUS C300. I've got an HP 14-inch unit. I have Acer 710s. The Acer 710s are nice, even though they're a small screen, because you can change the memory in it all the way up to 16 gigs. You can replace the tiny 16 gigabyte solid state drive with a regular 2.5-inch laptop spinning hard drive or SSD, any size you want. And so it does work. but these are 3 different platforms. The routine you have to go through, you have to be able to identify the family of the processor you have on your machine and get the right pieces of software to load in. It creates a new BIOS per se, and they just boot up plain Linux. And I use on some of them Gallium OS, which is not always that up to date, but it runs fast because it's tailored to the specific CPU chip in the device.
That's great. That's great. My next little project, if I can find the time, my oldest laptop, which is many years older, but I don't say too much about it, it's over there sitting, is that I can download the Chrome OS, which is separate from Chromebook, but it's the operating system, onto that and make it into a Chromebook type. It isn't a Chromebook. It'll have all of the features that are mostly web-based that Chrome OS does. So I'm interested in trying that out. I'd like to also mention that in your follow-up material, you're going to get a PDF from Tim, who is shared with me. He has a PDF, and if it's too big, then you can use Cal's program to save what you need. It's a PDF that says you can learn Linux in 5 days. And I told him, I said, I can't find 5 days to learn Linux because I got too many things interrupting it. But for anybody who might be interested in learning that, you'll get that in your follow-up material. I'll give it to Judy. And he also sent me a website that I'll pass on about being able to test out things on Linux on the web without having to install anything. Unfortunately, a couple of the other Linux or the other links that he sent are still referring to the distrotest.net website, which evidently is down. I went to it again today, and when you go to distrotest.net, it comes up with something about Amazon. So something has happened to that website, which was one that John from Pittsburgh told us about a long time ago, and it was a great one to be able to try it out without installing anything, but it's not there anymore. But he's got another one that has some listings of where you can go to try out some Linux or try out the terminal. And the terminal is a software that communicates between you and the root of your computer. But anyway, we'll do that next month. All right. Now we've got the open time for a little while. It's 2, but Judy and I will still stay around for a little bit if there's some people that want to talk, share. If there's anything that that we talked about today that you wanted to add something to or bring up. Oh, Judy's got her hand up already. Use your virtual hand so we can find you, and then we can let you talk. But Judy, go ahead.
Feel free to close the chat box.
Yeah, and if you have questions for next month, please email them to me, JKennedy@apcug.org.
We all have this creeping crud where we cough and our voices are raspy and rotten. Last night, I got a pop-up that I'd never seen before, and it was Microsoft letting me know that under penalty of death, I better install the updates. I'm one who would tell my students, you know, shut it down every night, or, you know, at least every 2 or 3 days. I don't pay. That's say as I, you know, do as I say, not as I do. I use it until I don't have any memory left, so to speak. But that was the first time I had gotten that. And I found that very interesting. Something was, you know, going. Anyway, you guys that have Raspberry Pis, I would love to see little mini presentations on how you use your Raspberry Pi. I find that fascinating. And we had, when Raspberry Pi first popped on the scene, one of our adventurous members gave us a presentation on it, and I've been intrigued ever since. I would love to put, and not on a Linux workshop, but on one of my workshops, somebody to show us a little bit about Edge and Chrome, what's new with it, Firefox, Brave, Opera. I get these questions all the time, and show them how DuckDuckGo works. And I think, like I say, I get questions, you know, how does this work? How does that work? And I don't use all of the browsers, so I can answer some of the questions, but not all of them. And let me see if I have, and I'm going to look around and see if I can find somebody to show us GNU Cache, since that is an often asked question. That's it. My hand is down. So we are open for questions,
Comments?
suggestions, ideas.
The team's goal is to help everybody learn Linux, but we are kind of getting to the point where we don't know what people want. Tom.
Oh, by the way,
Oh.
I do have 2 or 3 people that they're not going to get the handouts because I don't have the correct information.
Oh, no.
Yeah, you know, I only had 1 bounce. I didn't have any. I did not get the link. Yes. People are beginning to read things, which I find way cool. So take a look at your name and see if it's really you. First and last, because if you just have your first name, I often have several people with the same first name. And if somebody with that last name, I have their first name and their last name, then they get it. And whoever is just the same first name don't get anything. And that makes me sad.
Okay, Tom?
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. I know Tim just mentioned he can put Linux on a Chromebook. 2 questions. One is he willing to share his email address for people who have questions about how to do that? And the other is, can that method be used on a Chromebook that's being managed by another entity, like say a school or something? I got a Chromebook at the swap meet one time, and I couldn't do anything with it because I couldn't even get into it to even boot because it was managed by an entity and I didn't have the password.
Well, offhand, I can give you contact information in the chat, but generally speaking, it goes through Mr. Chromebox on the web for instructions. There are at least 4 different variations of the hardware you have to play with depending on the model you have. It could be as simple as removing a screw from the motherboard you don't need. It allows the BIOS to be loaded up, the new version, and then you install your Linux. The Gallium OS that I run on many of them is tailored to the specific processor in the unit, but it should work on any kind of Chromebook out there. I've got dozens of them. Most of them are obsolete. And I have converted 3 out of the 4 different styles. So it does work.
Okay. And is it reversible?
Technically, yes. One of the things that you may have to do is get the Chrome loaded up. Each Chrome OS has its own specific name, and you can download those onto a thumb drive, stick them in, get Chrome OS working again, so then you can go follow the routine to be able to take the Chrome OS, convert it into the developer's environment, and then use the Mr. Chrome box guidelines for being able to reflash the BIOS in part so that it looks like a regular system. And then you load in your Mint or other versions of Linux and go from there.
What I was thinking was, like I only have 1 Chromebook, and it's fairly new to me. It's an old Chromebook, but let's say I want to try Linux on the Chromebook, and then I want to go back to Chrome again.
Yeah, it's supposed to be reversible by having that flash drive
Okay.
to get the Chrome book operational, and through it, you can reverse it back to a Chrome
Okay.
normal book.
Great.
Would he need to know exactly which level of Chrome he would have to stop at, since they say that some Chromes are no longer supported. So his drive, or his hard drive, or his device, he would have to know that, okay, he can go up to Chrome OS 4, but he couldn't do 5, so you know what he could go back to.
Okay, like I say, for every Chromebook I've ever seen and touched, they each have a different name of the version that runs on that machine, such as the HP. I think the one I've got is called Falco, and every machine has its own version. You can download it, and you always get the last version that was created for the obsolete Chromebook. And then you just make sure that your Chrome book is running at the latest version. And then you go into Mr. Chromebox's stuff and do some additional research. And you just go through the process of, in some cases, remove a screw. In some cases, you have to take a tiny piece of tinfoil and plug it down into a little area that has 2 electric pins to short them out. And I forget what the third one is that I have done, but basically it's not that hard. It's mostly figuring it out.
Thank you.
I think, Tom, your first problem is you can't get into the Chromebook, can you?
Well, I had like 3 Chromebooks, and of the 3, one of them I'm using right now. The other 2, I couldn't get into them properly to do anything with them. So I just gave them back to the person I had them from. But I'm looking for the future, what I can do.
That's where you can use the internet on any machine, go out there, tell it what make, model of a Chromebook you happen to have that's not working, find the Chrome OS version, download it to your machine, load it onto a flash drive, stick it into the old Chromebooks that don't work, and it'll reload the OS and make it operational.
And it'll boot. See, these things aren't even, they boot to the screen asking for a password. I can't get beyond that. So these things, how do you configure the Chromebook to boot from the flash drive? You can't get
when you stick it in, you turn on the Chromebook. It says, oh, I see a USB drive. Oh, it's an operating system of Chrome OS. And it just loads it up.
Okay, so it's normally configured to boot from the sequence on a Chromebook is first an external flash drive if it sees one. Okay, great, thank you.
Yeah. I got an email from somebody who had a kind of a similar problem, that they had gotten a MacBook, and I can't answer Mac questions. And the person who he got the MacBook from was either a spouse that had died or something, and had no idea what the password was, and wanting to know how to crack the password in a MacBook. And I said that, we have a Linux program called Trinity that can get in and remove Windows passwords, but if they're not Microsoft cloud the account passwords. But I wasn't quite sure, so he was going to try that and see if it worked on the MacBook. Judy.
When you first started, Tom Kelly, when you first started your question, did you say it's a school Chromebook?
There were, I think some of them were school Chromebooks, which means they were either sold without like salvaged excess things were sold without being properly deregistered, or they were stolen, one or the other.
Let's hope it wasn't the latter. Okay, I just wanted to make sure that it wasn't being used by somebody who actually was in the school district, because then the answer to all of the things you talked about is, no, you can't do that. But Tom, my kids use Chromebooks in high school. I will ask my teacher kids to ask their IT guy.
They're usually customized versions of the Chrome OS to lock them down, to prevent the kids from screwing around with them and getting into trouble, so to speak.
Well, in our school district, when school shut down on Thursday, they were up and running on Tuesday, and every kid in high school and junior high had their very own Chromebook at home. And then they brought them back. But I'll let you know what I find out from my teacher kids.
Appreciate Judy, am I one of the people right now who won't get the handouts because my screen shows Tom Chrome?
Mm-hmm.
I won't get it then?
But right click on your picture and change it to Kelly.
Yeah, I mean, I can do that. Well, it actually doesn't work. I'm clicking that picture now. It doesn't do that. I must have it doesn't do anything when I point to my name.
Is there on the Chromebook, since I don't use it, 3 dots in the top corner of your picture?
Hold on, I'm moving. Right now, I can exit. My only choices on the very top is my gallery view. This is the settings. That might be it.
I'll change it for you.
Yeah, Bill be nice and change it for you. John from my neighbor to the west, what you got for us?
Hi there. Judy said she was interested in some presentations on Raspberry Pi. I don't know what's going to happen tonight for sure, but Craig Wright is going to do several topics on Raspberry Pi tonight in our Columbus Computer Society general meeting.
I'm intrigued with his mirror. I've seen it 2 or 3 times. And he has to put it all back together for me again before he can demo it here.
Well, this is an on the spur request from me to him, and he doesn't. Before today, he didn't even know he was doing it. So this might happen on any part of the Raspberry Pi. He's got a new Raspberry Pi that he put in a new case that has a 4-line display at the top of the case and lights on the fans for color operation, plastic side panels so you can see the lights and all kinds of stuff. So we had a presenter that called in sick and said they wouldn't be able to do the presentation tonight. And I knew what I'd seen Craig had been talking about the last couple presentations, and I asked him if he'd do something like that. And he might also cover the information he has on his personal website on how to do stuff with Raspberry Pis also.
I'm sure he was thrilled.
Well, you can get the link to get into the meeting from the last email he sent out, I believe Monday this week.
You got it.
Okay,
Thanks.
I'm done.
Okay, Steve.
Yeah, how much of a performance hit is there when you run a Windows program with Wine?
Well, it's gonna take stuff. I don't use it, but it's obviously it has to use up some of your RAM, and it has to use some of your processor up. I don't know whether it would be any more of a hit than it would if just running it on Windows. That's where we need to get somebody who's a Wine and Play on Linux and Bottles user to share that information. Anybody else have anything on that?
I will be experimenting with Bottles, but I haven't got the time there yet. But Play on I'm aware of also, but I'll go with Bottles first, and then I'll look at the Play on. But I'm also in virtual environments. I've had some issues with VirtualBox and VMware Free in the past. So I'm now also trying to figure out KVM for Linux. And I've got it installed, but I haven't created my first virtual machine yet. Haven't had time.
We'll have to have somebody else report back to us. And again, in terms of what we do on Learning for Linux, what I've got set up, I said, you know, that's just something to fall back on that we can always have something like substitute plans. But I hear that we've got a good possible topic for a day in which we can talk about virtual machines, because there are a number of ones with boxes and KVM and the VMware and that. So we're always looking for what can we share, and we'd love to have people who have that experience to take part of it. You know, if we had 4 different people that had a different VM virtual machine program they use, that'd be a great day of topics.
I'll ask Melton what he's using now, because I know he's gone through trials and errors. When the first one he used worked beautifully, and then, you know.
Yeah. So, you know, that's my hope. I'd love to be able to, you know, have specific programs and features and focusing on something. And then when nobody has anything, then fall back to something else. Okay, Bernard.
Judy, I subscribe to a Raspberry Pi newsletter if you're interested in it.
She's interested in you teaching it to us.
No way.
Anybody else have comments about what we talked about in some of our questions today about, you know, the cameras or the partitioning? We talked some about the games. I think this has been a good start to this year. And like I said, we're always open to ideas and suggestions.
Outstanding, John. Way cool meeting.
Well, thank you. So if nobody else has anything else, I'll go over and thank everybody. Orv had to leave. Of course, thank Dave for his input, but being virtual, and hope that his home construction is going well. And thank Cal, always good information, excellent presentation. And you'll all get copies of what he did that are so colorful and enjoyable. And thank Bill for co-hosting and Judy for taking care of questions and stuff. I will say, for those that are still here, we're back next week with a very interesting 2-part workshop on Google Photos tips and tricks with the geeks. And then John Kraut's going to be talking about something that everybody should be focusing on, and that's getting your calendar of your computer club's activities out in the public. And so John's going to talk about creating and getting published public calendars. So make sure you get signed up for that and join us next week. And then a reminder about the following month, there will be no Wednesday workshop on the second Wednesday, because that's going to be our Saturday Safari. Judy.
The calendar presentation came about of people getting in touch with me asking how they should do it. And John Kraut does a presentation on, not for your group, but how to share your own personal calendar with whoever you want to share it to, even with people who don't have Gmail. And so I asked him if he could modify it to work for that. And he said, yes. So good. You ask, I try to do it. I could find somebody who knows how to do something.